Hello. For your homework this week, you're going to need two things. You're going to need 3 different colors. You can use colored pencils, a marker, anything that's 3 different colors. And you're also going to need the poem called Treblinka in your book. I'm not sure what page it's on because I don't have my booklet in front of me, but I think it's near the end of the book. So go ahead and find the poem and go get 3 different colors to write with, and then pause the video and come back. Okay, welcome back. Now, the reason why we need 3 different colors is because our learning target is about identifying inferences and using your background knowledge, using explicit information, which is information that is just directly stated. The author just comes out and says what they're trying to say. And then we're also going to be annotating for implicit information. And implicit information we kind of have to think about. We have to use some of our background knowledge and sort of make an educated guess, a conclusion of what the author's saying. This is like our inference. So implicit information is not directly said, but it makes us wonder, I think the author's trying to say this. Okay? So let's go ahead and get started. And you're going to want to create a key off to the side of the poem. Okay? So I'm going to go ahead and create my key. And I'm going to choose the color red, and I'm just going to write BK. Okay, BK just stands for background knowledge. Okay, and whenever I see something in there that says, "Oh, I already knew that," and that's going to help me understand the poem, then I underline that with that or circle it with that color. Okay. My next color that I'm going to choose is brown, and for my brown. Anything that the author says explicitly, where it just comes out and directly says it, I'm going to use that color. And then I'm going to use green for times when I have to infer based on implicit information. So the author might not directly say it, so I got to kind of think, what's the author saying here? Okay. First things first, as just a good reader, what I would do is just to read through this poem once without annotating at all. Just observe it, just get a feel for the poem. So go ahead and do that right now. Just pause the video and read through the poem in your booklet, and then start the video again. Okay. Now that you've hopefully done what I said, recommended, and read through the poem, we're going to go through now and close read it. Okay? So the first thing that we really need to do here is take a look at this background information in the poem. Okay? And this background information can become background knowledge because it may be something you didn't know and it's telling you, so it'll help you understand the poem. It says, Treblinka was a death camp, extermination camp, where over 800,000 people were killed at this death camp alone. At some Nazi death camps, victims were forced to work, but people were sent to this one for one reason, to be put to death. And we actually talked about this a little bit in class, about the difference between a death camp and a concentration camp. So let's go ahead and start reading the poem, and I'm going to be zooming in a little bit, just so you can see my annotations. Okay? Now, anything that I annotate in here, you also need to annotate in your booklet, okay? This is, the homework will be, checking to make sure that you've done the annotations and to make sure that you've close read this, okay? If your poem is blank on when this is due, then it will communicate that you didn't do it. So make sure that anything that is annotated, underlined here, that you do the same, okay? The first stanza. Europe's young stir peacefully in sleep, after praying to God for their souls to keep. So tired after a sunny day of playing, now tucked to bed warm, after on knees praying. Okay, now some background information that I had was that this praying to God for their souls to keep, I know that is part of like a well-known prayer. Lay me down to sleep, pray the Lord my soul to keep. And it also says right here, praying. So what I can do is I can also use the brown because the author comes out and says that the children were praying. And when it says in the first line, Europe's young, okay, Europe's young is, it tells us that they're children. In fact, we underline Europe's too, just so we know that these are children in Europe. They stir peacefully in sleep. They're praying after a sunny day of playing. So it tells us right here, and this seems to be literal language that the children were actually playing. Okay? All right, let's take a look at the second stanza. What a horrible thing to awaken the next day, to realize these things are now taken away. Okay, so what I'm going to go ahead and underline is these things are now taken away. And what I know that the author's talking about is the things that were mentioned in this stanza. You know, the playing and the peaceful sleep. Okay. Into the ghettos they march. We've talked about ghettos, and so I have some background knowledge there. Collective custody they lied, and in the distance, Treblinka's mouth is opening wide. Okay. Now, one thing that I have to sort of think about and process what this is trying to say is where it talks about Treblinka's mouth is opening wide. And if you think about our figurative language target, you know, this is personification, because Treblinka, it tells us in the background knowledge up here that we read that Treblinka was a death camp. So, you know, it gives a mouth to this death camp. So we have to sort of infer what's happening. All right. O God in heaven, show us your great power. Why must these little ones plunge from life's tower? Okay, so we have some, this is figurative language here where it says plunge from life's tower. And the meaning of that's explicit info, so I'm going to get my explicit information color out and underline that. In fact, I want to include little ones. So it's telling me little ones plunge from life's tower. It's figurative language, meaning plunging from life's tower is just a way of saying dying. Okay, so that comes out and says that these little ones are dying. To be rendered of their souls by Treblinka's great might, in yellow sand they are buried day and night. Okay, now it says that they're buried here in yellow sand, and that's interesting. We're going to see that again. That's another piece of explicit information. Okay. Oh, Treblinka, Treblinka, your jaws gape so wide. Again, we hear the personification of the mouth. So I need to figure out what it means by jaws gaping so wide. The young lambs herd in, unaware of what's inside. Okay, so young lambs, kind of have to think about this because this is not literal language. I need to infer what little lambs is talking about, and unaware of what's inside. I'm not sure what that means, so that I have to make an inference based on that. Run, little children, run for your lives. You've been brought to the slaughterhouse where no one survives. Okay, so this is pretty directly stated here. No one survives here. Okay, it also calls it the slaughterhouse. It is easy to swallow these small ones whole. Efficiently you render body from soul. Now here, this is figurative language, and so I have to kind of think about what the author's trying to say, where it says rendering body from soul. You really can, in a way, you know, remove someone's soul from their body. So what does that mean? What we're going to do, you know, a side note here, is we're going to come back and we're going to try to figure what the green underlines mean. Straight from the trains, chase through your door. As Warsaw is emptied, you strain for more. Go back to my background knowledge here. Warsaw is a ghetto, okay? As Warsaw is emptied, you strain for more. Remember we talked about what the purpose of a ghetto was, and the purpose of a ghetto was to, it was sort of a holding tank before people went into concentration and death camps. Nothing stops you, Treblinka, hidden away in the woods, as your yellow sand turns red with blood. Is there anyone to stop this? Something must be done. If you are not stopped, there will remain not one. Okay? Here we see your yellow sand turns red with blood. Is there anyone to stop this? Something must be done. Oh, here, this is interesting. Treblinka, this is explicit information. Treblinka is hidden away in the woods, so it tells me that it's there. Alright, stanza 7. Treblinka, you child eater, your wheels spin and turn, your gears well oiled, while the human soup is churned. A soup made of children who no longer run or play. So I kind of have to think about, I'm going to take my inference color, and I'm going to actually bracket off this whole stanza, because when it talks about a child eater and the gears well oiled and human soup, kind of have to think a little bit about what that means. Okay, on to the second page. A bloody soup that is dumped into yellow sand and clay. Okay. It's kind of interesting. Here we have this yellow sand and clay again. And I'm going to tell you some background knowledge that you probably didn't know about this, and we're going to, I think, find that a little bit later on based on what the poem says. Dig pits in the sand hidden beyond the trees. Treblinka exists only if no one sees. Covered over by them so that none would see the place. To hide what was done, there is scarcely a trace. So we're really starting to get into some more implicit information, things that we have to infer. Scarcely a trace. To hide what was done. We're still trying to figure out what's going on here. Right here it says covered by them, and it's interesting, you'll notice that them is capitalized, which is interesting. So we're going to underline this whole thing, covered by them. That's an important piece of explicit information. Okay. The satanic Nazis smile, beckon and beguile. Why? It is not so hard to fool a young child. Could God really be giving these young ones up to die? Innocent, teary eyes look to their parents and say goodbye. Some important pieces of explicit info. The innocent, teary eyes look up to their parents and say goodbye. We have a very obvious visual of what's happening with the kids. Here we go. I'm going to underline some background knowledge. Satanic Nazis. We've talked about the Nazis and what they did. It would have been better had there never been a birth, for these innocent eyes will never see life's worth. Okay. Again, when we see, we have to sort of infer what the author means. We'll never see life's worth. I have a pretty good idea what that means. Fate has chosen these little ones to die. Pretty explicit information there. That was sloppy. Try that again. That was better. Many today still ask why. And actually, I can connect to that. Many today still ask why, so I'm going to underline that with background knowledge. We've had discussions in class about, like, why do they do it? It's just hard to figure out why. We think it's all over. It is done. It is past. We want to believe the children scream their last. But listen close, and you'll hear the sound of Treblinka's faint heartbeat below the yellow ground. Here we see the yellow ground again. We also hear Treblinka's faint heartbeat. I'm going to underline that with, like, implicit information, because speaking figuratively, we got to try to figure out what that means by the heartbeat. Okay. In our weakness, we call the madmen them and they. Are our souls so different and brave that we'd have stood in the way? So exult not, my friend, in a self-glorified stand, for Treblinka sprang forth from the heart and mind of man. This whole last stanza here, I can't can't just underline one line in here, because this whole last stanza really is communicating to us what the author is trying to say and what the author means. When it says here, this piece of explicit information, the heart and mind of man, that Treblinka sprang forth from it, from the heart and mind of man. What that means is that the whole idea of Treblinka and the death camps, that was a human idea. Okay? So what it says here is, so exalt not my friend in a self-glorified stance. So don't go around, glorifying yourself and saying that, you're so much better than the Nazis and making yourself sound better than they were, because what it's saying is, this right here, this whole idea of a death camp came about because it was a human idea. We're all humans, and so what it's trying to say is we all have that capability. Okay? Some things that we really need to try to figure out now, that we have to infer, is what it says here when it says, to hide what was done, there's scarcely a trace. This line right here. Try to figure out what that means. It talks right here. Line that right there. It talks about how in this stanza there were pits dug in the sand and hidden beyond the trees, covered up by them. A piece of background knowledge that you may or may not have had is that this particular death camp and several other death camps were covered up by the Nazis. And, we talked a little bit in class about how they tried to cover up what they did. And this is an example of that happening. And so, what we infer from this stanza here is that, go off to the side here and write this down, and I need you to make sure that you get this down too, is that Treblinka was covered up by the Nazis. It was covered up so that people wouldn't see the evil that they did. Now down here, this is really important, because this really gets to the whole meaning of the poem. Where it says here that Treblinka sprang forth from the heart and mind of man, one thing that I really infer from that is that we all are capable of evil. I'm not trying to be a Debbie Downer here, but this poem definitely has some legitimacy that we need to think about. When we look around at people being bullies and the way that we hurt others all the time. This is just a more extreme version of that. This is something that I infer and think about because of that. So I've gone back and some of these things with the yellow ground and the faint heartbeat. This all makes sense. Oops. This all makes sense when I think about that Treblinka was this death camp was covered up by the Nazis. So there's one last thing I need you to do to finish this session. Okay? I want you on the bottom right of this page. I want you to write. Doesn't matter what color, but I want you to write this word. Make sure you get the two dots above the N. Okay? And then what I want you to do is I want you to circle it. This is very important that you do this. You'll see why later. Okay? Go ahead and make sure that that is on there and you've circled it. And that ends the session.